Hi. Just quick note, this is going to be a live streamed event. So first of all, welcome and thank you so much for coming. It's really appreciated for you coming. If you need the toilet, just sort of tell anyone, and it's literally right outside those doors. We're not planning on a fire drill, but if the fire alarm does go off, just the fire assembly point is out the side of the main doors. It's fine for you to have your mobile phones on you, but please don't use them and sort of just keep them on silent if you can. Any issues, go to a youth worker, whoever's come with you today, I'm sure they'll sort it out. And then we've got a break at 10:50 and 1 o'clock. So first of all, why are we here? This is a response event to sort of the Make Your Mark ballot. I think you all would have seen it at some point. It was a little slip about that big, and you voted for the top priority you wanted to focus on with us, and the top three were homelessness, knife crime, and mental health. And back in December, we sort of did an event to just see like why those were the top three that we got, and then today's just sort of seeing like what's been done about it, and it's a chance for you to actually ask questions that you have related to those topics and actually see like what we've done with like those topics that were chosen. So at the top, this is E2C. Hi. We're Exchange Change. We're Monmouthshire Youth Council, and we just sort of like work on bringing like opinions and actually making action on it. So we've been working on the mental health side of things lately and actually making sure that something's been done about it. And so does everyone just sort of introduce yourselves, like who you are? Throwing it on you. Ruby, hi, start. Who are you?
Do I just go like that? Okay. Hi, I'm Ruby. I am the representative from Monmouth Comprehensive School.
I'm Taryn. Mic doesn't work. I'm Taryn. I'm from Chepstow, and I am the Youth Council's media officer.
I'm Taylor. I am the secretary for Engage with Change.
I am Tegan. Hi, I'm the chair of E2C.
Hi, I'm Sophie.
And then lastly, this is Richard John. Do you want to sort of just introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for coming this morning. It's fantastic to see so many young people here. I'm Richard John. I'm the County Councillor for the Mitchell-Troy ward, but I'm also the Cabinet Member for Children, Young People and Leisure. So what that means, you've got 43 county councillors in Monmouthshire, each elected in their own ward. And we come together after the election and elect a leader who then appoints his cabinet. So there'll be a councillor responsible for social services. My role covers education and some of the leisure services that we offer across the county. And we come in here to, we have meetings of all councillors and we make some decisions as a collective, all 43. But as a cabinet, the 8 of us who have specific roles, there's another councillor who's responsible for roads and waste collection, someone else who oversees our governance arrangements, someone else who's responsible for economic development. There are some decisions that, as a group, as the 8 of us, we can make in a cabinet meeting. And we will come in here to be held to account for some of those decisions by opposition and backbench councillors. And that's a really important constructive part of the job, because although we were elected as some of us as Conservative or Labour or Liberal Democrat, or some not affiliated to any political party, actually there's far more that we agree on than we disagree. And if you were to watch our full council meetings, that may not always come across, but in the scrutiny committees, in some of the other meetings we have, actually there's an awful lot that we do agree on. And actually we all pretty much agree on what we want to achieve. The question, and what sometimes divides us, is how do we get there? How do we achieve those goals? And some of the greatest achievements, I think, that have been delivered by Monmouthshire County Council, although they've been led by the administration, they've had the backing of councillors from all political parties. So we're particularly proud of the new schools we've built, particularly the recent secondary schools in Caldecott and Monmouth, but also some of the newer primaries in the county, Raglan, Roggett, Landfoist, Kiminview. And we want to do more to invest in our school estate across the county. We want new schools in Abergavenny and in Chepstow. But while those have been led by the administration, they've had cross-party support, and opposition councillors have been able to get involved in the development of those processes. So we work quite collaboratively, and I hope you have some really useful discussions today. We have some quite heated discussions in this chamber sometimes, but if you've got opinions on things, if you've got strong opinions on things, I think it's right that you should own those. And I hope today you have the chance to express your opinions, because your views really do matter. You've got elected representatives who are there to represent you as much as anyone else in the population. So if you've got strong views on something, I would say to you, don't be afraid to contact your assembly member or your member of parliament or your local councillor. Our email addresses are all in the public domain. If you feel strongly about something, please don't be afraid to send us an email and tell us what you think. So I hope you do have the chance to raise your views today, and anything you can do to lobby us about things that are important to you, please don't be afraid to do that. So, because we really do care what you think. It's your county as much as anyone else's. I mean, it's your county almost more than anyone else's, because it's going to be yours for an awful lot longer. So please do enjoy the day. I hope you have the chance to air your views, and we're going to be really interested to see what you have to say about some of these really important issues. So thank you for what you're doing, and I hope you have a good time here. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Definitely going off like the point about opinions. Like, don't be afraid. If you have a question today, honestly, just ask it. You're not going to be judged here. So next on, we're going to introduce the panel we've got today, who are the people who will actually be answering your questions today. So do you want to start like that side and just...
Hello. I'm responsible for the council's housing service, and that service covers a number of functions that probably most of you will be fairly familiar with. Homelessness is our big function, which I know is a subject for today. Disabled adaptations. We work with housing associations to build new properties and affordable housing, and we provide a lot of housing support, which probably most of you might be a little less aware of. So that's the main service that we operate within Monmouthshire, within the council, but we also work with lots of other housing related agencies, supporting, steering, encouraging, and some of those types of activities might include energy efficiency, supporting. You might have seen PV panels, solar panels on roofs, insulation. We did a lot in Chepstow, which you might be aware of. What else do we get involved with? There's young people's hostels in Abergavenny and Chepstow. So there's lots of things that we're involved with, we're either directly responsible for, or in the background steering and helping. So I think that's my lot, and hopefully anything about homelessness that you queried, I can answer later.
Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Lewis. I'm the Planning Policy Manager for Monmouthshire County Council. So my team is responsible for preparing the local development plan for the county. We've got a current adopted plan, which is this one, which runs to 2021. It sets out the land use allocations for the county, so it allocates land for housing, employment, retail, things like that. And it also designates areas for protection, so like green wedges, things like that. We're in the process of preparing a new plan, which Mark is going to talk to you about now.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Mark Hand and I head up the housing planning and building control teams. So Rachel and Ian are part of my team, and Ian's already explained what the housing service does. In terms of building control, that's a service that looks at how things are built. So structural safety and fire protection. So without starting on a quite morbid tone, think things like the Grenfell Tower, all those issues with the cladding and the fire that happened in London. So that's part of what building control is all about. In terms of planning, there's two arms. One is the part that Rachel said, which is around our actual forward-looking plan. So we have this plan that allocates land and has policies for how we determine future planning applications. And then the other arm is actually making decisions on those applications. And that's everything from somebody building an extension to their house to new retail developments, new big housing estates. So things like in Monmouth, the Wannistow Road estate, in Chepstow, the Maybe Bridge site that's been quite controversial locally. So that's in essence what we're looking at in terms of planning. The local development plan tries to pull together all kinds of things. So it's not just about housing, it's about jobs, it's about retail, making sure our high streets work. It isn't just by accident that the mix of shops, cafes, and other uses happens. There's quite a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that a lot of people possibly don't realise or think that much about until it really affects them directly. And then we also look at the infrastructure supporting that. So yeah, it's all very well saying build 500 houses here, but what about the road capacity? Are the schools big enough? What about the primary healthcare, the doctor surgeries and all that kind of stuff? So it's trying to weigh up all of those things, and also the environmental impact. So we've got a fantastic county. We need to make sure new development doesn't ruin that. Very mindful of the climate emergency and all of those pressures. So there's lots going on in that sense. Mindful that today is primarily discussion around your three priority topics, so mental health, knife crime and homelessness. But we have partly come to answer some of the questions, but partly also to make you aware of the local development plan and the new work we're starting. And there is a direct relationship, certainly in terms of mental health and homelessness, providing homes for people. A safe, convenient, affordable home is directly linked to people's mental well-being, and not having that causes aspects of mental unhealth. So what we wanted to talk to you about briefly, if you don't mind me entertaining me for a few more minutes, is our new consultation. So we started work on this new plan, which will take us up to 2033. What we typically do as a council is go out and talk to community groups, but this is 2033. This is about you guys. In 2033, or well before then, you're going to be thinking about getting jobs. You're going to be thinking about where you live, and how this county works. So we really want to engage with you and find out how this affects your future. What are your inputs, rather than talking to the groups that we always traditionally talk to. We need to talk to them as well, but we really want to try and engage with you better. So we have got a little animation that tries to set out what the LDPs are about. It's only 3 minutes long, so if you're happy, if that's okay, chairs, we'll just show you this briefly. I don't think the sound on the big system's going to work, so I'll have to put my mic close to my PC. And then, hopefully if there's questions from you later around this theme, we'll go into a bit more detail.
Monmouthshire County Council is required to produce a Local Development Plan, LDP, which is a document to guide the use of land and development in Monmouthshire. We are currently preparing a replacement plan that will guide future development in Monmouthshire until 2033. The plan will set out local planning policies and identify how much development will take place and where. It covers things like housing, employment and facilities, but will also identify areas that need to be protected from development. Planning for the well-being of our future generations is a key goal of Monmouthshire's LDP, which is guided by Welsh Government under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Wales Act 2015. The new LDP will be prepared in accordance with our delivery agreement, which sets out the proposed timescales and consultation arrangements. The replacement LDP will be adopted at the end of 2021, early 2022. Work has already commenced on the replacement plan. One of the first stages of the process is to set out the issues that Monmouthshire is facing, together with a draft vision and objectives to address these issues. The key issues and challenges facing the county include the ageing population and relative absence of 20 to 40-year-olds, which impacts on our economic base and future economic prospects. High average house prices, lack of affordable housing, high levels of out-commuting, the challenges of rural isolation and sustaining rural communities, the protection of our landscapes and heritage that make Monmouthshire a unique, special and attractive place to live. The need to tackle climate change and carbon reduction. Opportunities associated with the removal of Severn Bridge tolls and Cardiff Capital Region City deal. A number of draft objectives and a vision have been identified to address these issues, which is set out in the Issues, Vision and Objectives paper, and this will help to shape our preferred strategy. We are currently working on our growth and spatial options to consider how much growth is needed and where this growth should be located. This work will inform the preferred strategy, which we will consult on later this year. We'd like to know what you think about these growth and spatial options. Now is the time to get involved and have your say. To leave your thoughts and comments, please visit Monmouthshire's Planning Policy website, where you can also access more detailed information. Alternatively, you can come along to our community engagement drop-in session at County Hall Usk to find out more about the LDP growth and spatial options. We'd love to see you.
Okay, thanks very much. If there's any questions about that, we can discuss that later in relation to the themes you've chosen.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Blakemore. I'm a Chief Inspector with Gwent Police. The reason I'm here today is because I lead on the community safety element of the wellbeing plan for Monmouthshire. So part of that is chairing a Safer Monmouthshire group meeting, which is a collective of partners where we discuss things such as antisocial behaviour hotspots and how we address those issues there. I also chair the Serious Organised Crime Group meeting. So today, please field any questions that you like in my direction. I'm more than happy to answer anything. Obviously, we've got the agenda 3 topics, but if you'd like to go outside of that, it doesn't matter to me. The chairs might have a view on it, but I'm happy to answer anything that you'd like to ask me.
Good morning, everybody. Mike Richards, Superintendent, also from Gwent Police. And I form part of the senior management team that covers 2 local authority areas. So I'm responsible for not only Monmouthshire, but I'm responsible for Newport as well. So I'm responsible for about 530 police officers. So we've got half of the Gwent Police's workforce that cover both Monmouthshire and Newport. I'm here to support Richard today and look forward to trying to respond as best we can to your 3 hot topics: knife crime, homelessness, and mental health. Mental health is a massive demand on us. 10% of our daily demand is linked to mental health calls for service. So a big demand on us, as is homeless at the moment in areas of Newport. So look forward to the stage where we listen to you and look forward to hearing your questions and responding as best we can. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Bronwyn John. I'm the Head of Service for Community Services for Monmouthshire for the Health Board. The Health Board, as you're aware, is a huge beast. It's got 13,000 plus staff in it, and it's divided into different sections. So part of my role is to act as the partnership manager, coordinating between all the different divisions of the Health Board to bring into the partnership arena to work with the police, the local authority, social services, fire service, all the other partners, to try to make sure that we've got a united response so that we aren't, as organisations, doing things in isolation. So my role is not a specialist one, but what I do have is an oversight of what's happening in the Health Board and how the Health Board can work with partners to make sure that we deliver what your priorities are.
Hi, and my name's Luke Jones. I'm a clinical psychologist by background. Really pleased to be here today, and as other people have said, really looking forward to hearing your questions. Also slightly anxious seeing this many of you in a room and wondering exactly what questions might be coming in my direction. Don't mind for that lot so much. My role is I'm leading a piece of work which the Health Board, in partnership with the local authorities in Gwent, so thinking there in terms in particular of social care and also education, we're recognising that actually currently we don't work in a very effective joined up way around children and young people's mental health and emotional well-being, and that we're really trying to work differently and in a much more joined up way together to think about how we can better support children and young people's emotional well-being. That's what my role is now. One of the areas that I'm really keen that we can be doing much more of is how we are hearing the voice of children and young people and their families, and how that's really shaping the work that we're doing as we take this forward. So yes, while it is a little bit scary, it's also really, really exciting for me to have the opportunity to hear people's thoughts and help us to think about how we can start factoring those thoughts into our plans. So thanks very much for the invite.
Thank you all for your introduction stuff. The first thing we're going to be doing today is actually we're going to be doing a debate today that's sort of just going to get us all hopefully fired up and ready for questions later on. It's just going to be statements, and all it is you're just going to we're going to read out statements, and then you're going to go to either one side of the room where agree is over there, or you can go to disagree, and it just depends how you feel about the statement.
Show of hands who's done this before. Yeah, why don't you join it? Come on. Yeah, come and join it. So as you can see, you've got agree over that.
Jamie, why do you think that Marmite is great?
It's nice.
Nice? Why do you think it's nice?
I don't know.
Did you just like it?
Yeah.
Then Dylan, what about you?
Well, just it's everyone in my family's favourite spread. Have toast every morning, so it's my favourite.
Amelia, what about you? Why do you not like Marmite?
It just doesn't taste nice. It just doesn't taste nice.
Doesn't taste nice. Alina, touch on that mic and tell them.
It's just straight up disgusting. Like I don't understand why people like it. It's really bad.
Any rebuttals?
I completely disagree. You can eat it with anything.
So. Go with Megan. So, social media doesn't make us lonely, would you?
Well, I think that as it can be used for bad things, it can also be used for very good things, and you can connect with people who are like on the other side of the world, and so it actually makes you less lonely.
Nice. What about you?
I disagreed because I thought if you were like had quite a good life at social media and then you like posted stuff and you've seen that people liked it and they commented, it could make you even more happy, so you could like have an average day and then it would cheer you up. But if you're someone that's always on social media, I would agree that it would make you unhappy, so it depends.
What about you, Wesley? So, social media does make us lonely. Do you?
I only said that because you're not actually physically talking to them in person. They could just be some random person who actually could just be mean to you, making fun of you and stuff. So you don't know if you find out they're actually might be being mean to you, you'll feel really lonely and stuff. So
valid points.
what about you?
Whilst there's some positive impacts of it and being able to talk to your friends when you're not in school, there's also like the constant need for you to seem happy online, and you'll delete a post if it doesn't reach like 80 likes, and that's just not the environment you need in a society where we should all be connecting and sharing our views to face, whereas online you could share something and it'll be blown out of proportion, and because they don't know the tone that you're saying it in, they can take it in such the wrong way that it's just not good.
Let's go to an adult.
I don't think there should be an age restriction per se on the internet. I think the obvious things that, there are some obvious things there should be an age restriction onto, but I think it's such a fantastic tool, the internet. I remember, unfortunately, when it wasn't so widely used as it is today, and I think we're a better place for the internet. And I think it should be as accessible to as many people as possible.
Edie.
Kids, if they're bored, they'll just go on the internet and they'll play a game, so it gets them off their parents' backs.
We wouldn't really want like really young kids like looking up all sorts of things, and if they don't have any guidelines, if their parents aren't that supportive, or they haven't given them the right knowledge on the internet, then it can be quite dangerous. So this one. Oh.
What you got now?
That's
okay. Gracie. Is that me?
I think there should be an age restriction because you can search up anything on the internet. Although it's a really positive thing, you can search up unpositive things.
We have the Lydia, you're a nice solid in the middle. Why are you here?
I think that our school cares about our problems, but they may not act on it, either the best that they can or just don't know what to do or where they can go to find support that we may need.
I think schools do deal with the problems but also don't, because it kind of just depends on what the problem is as well, because schools are mainly not aware of some and are aware of others, and it's just the way they deal with it. Like sometimes they don't know what to do. So.
I mean, our school listens to some people. It also neglects listening to many others. Our school's very selective. If you're good in classes and you have good attendance, they're happy to listen to you. But if you're not, then they'd rather just forget you ever said anything. Point in case, the counselling system in our school, we have a set amount of counsellors. Some people can be quite disruptive, and they just don't take them seriously if they need that kind of support.
Why do you agree?
I don't feel like the school cares about my personal issues, but I do feel as a whole they care about the well-being of the school. But I don't know if it's to improve the well-being of the students, but to more improve how the school looks to outsiders, or to how pupils behave in lessons.
Shall we get another question, Tara? Easier? So, Mark. Well, I'm coming to you.
Okay, I'm only on this side because I guess statistically it is mainly adults. That's not to say there aren't children and young people who have homelessness issues. There's probably quicker and sometimes easier interventions for young people as well, so they're less likely to be homeless for any period of time. That's not a kind of a universal truth, but on the whole, that's probably how it works. So numerically, there's more adults who are homeless than children, so I went with this side.
Yeah, Mark said what I was going to say. The majority of homelessness is adults. However, believe me, there are a lot of young people and children that are caught up in homelessness and are affected. So yeah, I can completely understand that side of the room.
What do you think?
I think I actually agree with what Ian and Mark were saying, in the sense that statistically I know that there are more adults who are homeless, but that's largely because the children's figures are hidden. So single adults are a main category of homeless people. But when families are affected, it does affect the children, and you know the children are there, but they don't necessarily have the voice that the adult would have. So that's why I came on this side.
Yeah. Who's that girl hiding behind Edie there?
Oh, yeah, come on. Start getting your voice heard. What? Thank you. Jack. Come on.
Do you want to hit that one up there?
Well, het loopt kid aan het tijd dat working without the bouwend. I'm thinking, where the bouwend gaan. And like loaded kid literally own that. But I hide it. They don't have the number. No, forgot. It's not many homeless people out there.
So,
to you, if you want to go sit back down now.
Right. Yeah, you said this. Hello, hi. We've told you to sit down, but it's break next, so there's going to be drinks and biscuits outside if you want to go get there. I think there's teas and coffees. It's just in the corridor. You can have a quick break if you need the toilet or anything. And then it's just a sort of good time as well to sort of think of what questions you want to ask. So make sure you just have something in your mind ready for when we come back at around 11ish, when we're actually going to start doing the question time. So if you want to go take a break, have a chat.
You've got 10 minutes. Get back in here, 10 past. So quick.
Tasha's in Caldecott now.
Oh,
Hello, Tasha in Caldecott School. I wonder if you can see this. I'm not sure. Text me if you can.
Hi.
We're just going on a break at the moment. They're going to have 10 minutes, so we'll be back at 10 past 10. And then we're going to start asking questions. So Caldecott's the only one live streaming it. Whoop, whoop.
We've already got 2 questions in.
We've got 2 questions in already. I tell you what. Mentimeter us in if you can see me now. So you go to menti.com, type in the code, and then text your question. Anything. Keep it clean.
Taggart. So first of all, just to quickly, in case I didn't get around to your break, to explain what Menti is, it's just a question form. So if you put the code in at the top, you can send in a question, because I know some people maybe not feel like comfortable enough putting their hand up and ask it in front of everyone. So you're allowed to use your phones to do that. You could just log in on the website. So do you want to start with a question up there?
Anybody here who hasn't got a mobile phone and would like to borrow a tablet? Yeah? Okay.
Do we have...
You've got 2 tablets.
Wait.
I'll ask one. We'll get you them now.
Okay, so starting off, may as well, on the subject, start off with a question from Menti. So why don't we do just do the first one. How is the need to build new homes balanced with protecting our green spaces? So I'm assuming that'll be one of the housing departments.
Yeah, shall I start off with the answer to this one? It's a good question. It's something that we have to do through the local development plan process. So we have to get evidence of what the housing need is, and then we look at different options of what levels of growth that we think the county should or could have, and that's what we're consulting on at the moment. What we're consulting on at the moment, without going off on a massive tangent, is if you assume that nobody moved into Monmouthshire, so it's just the population that's currently here, by 2033, our population and number of jobs would actually have declined because more people are dying than are being born in the county. So that's one extreme option, that we assume that no one moves in, and that's what's happened. I think we'd lose nearly 4,000 jobs by 2033 and be knocking down 150 houses. The other extreme option that we're looking at is a 22% level of growth, which means we'd need about 10,000 homes and a lot of jobs created to make that work. So how we make those choices, some of it's based around policy aspirations and looking at what do they achieve or what harm do they cause. But then in terms of actually identifying the sites, we have all kinds of evidence behind it. So some protected areas of the county, things like the Brecon Beacons National Park, the Wye Valley area of outstanding natural beauty. So there's a greater level of protection for those. There's also some European designations like the River Wye, River Usk, River Severn that are relevant. And then we're looking at things like landscape character and heritage protection. But in actual fact, there's some stats out there that confirm the amount of our county that actually is defined as built on is only 3%. So that's not to say that we can and should build on the other 97%, but we do have quite a lot of scope to work out that. Also, lastly, from our consultation of various stages of this process, people have a chance to say which sites they support and which ones they don't. At times it is looking at what's the least bad rather than what's perfect. There probably isn't a perfect site, but if there's particular areas that you think should be protected from development, either as valuable kind of recreation spaces or just areas that are important for their biodiversity or their appearance, then they can be factored into the plan as well. So it's a real mix of evidence and opinion to try and see where the best places are. But it is quite a tough job. A lot of people accept the need for some development, some houses and some jobs. When it's the field next to your house, people are less keen to accept that and try and push it somewhere else. So that's a real challenge for us to, someone somewhere will end up being that person with a field near their house being developed. So how do we balance all of that stuff?
Thank you for that. Before we go back to that, is there any questions actually in the room that anyone wants to ask? Anyone?
Oh, there's one at the back.
Whoever's got a question, just...
Yeah,
you.
Hit your mic.
What can we do for people who need special support with drug usage? Thank
you. Thank you for the question. I think it's around the support that's provided for people who are under the substance misuse issues. Is that the question? From the police service end, we generally work with partners to try and address the root cause of crime and disorder per se. And obviously a lot of crime and disorder is driven by the misuse of drugs. So people who are brought into custody for certain offences will get drug tested. Following that drug test, if it's a positive result, they're referred on to additional services from partner agencies. And a lot of that is then trying to establish, you know, the root cause for why they take drugs, why they behave the way that they do, and how can we support them out of that behaviour and activity, which in turn, if you can break the cycle of behaviour, you'll make that area safer. Does that answer your question? Yeah, sure.
Can I add? Yeah, and part of our response is to invest heavily within education. So we have 12 officers within Gwent Police that are dedicated to working within schools in an education programme. And much of that is driven around the agenda with drug misuse. So you may see work that we're doing in primary schools with our mini police or our Heatherly Bach scheme. Those schemes are there to build character, to build resilience amongst young children, and give them that courage that they can say no to drugs. So I think we have to look at our preventative agenda and get upstream and stop young people, going down that road of wanting to try drugs. So heavy investment in schools as well.
Thank you for that. And I think we'll ask one from Menti now. This is for mental health. How do you think schools can provide more help for those who suffer with mental illness, as the waiting and referral times for CAMHS is quite long?
There was another question as well, I think, which was about schools and mental health. I can't remember what it was, but which seemed quite similar to that one. So, no, really pleased to future plans for mental health in Monmouthshire in schools, which really happy to say a little bit about. And actually, Sarah at the back, do you want to wave, Sarah? Will be extremely keen at lunchtime. This is my time to remember to have given Sarah her plug, to speak with you around what your thoughts are around what you would want from your schools, and how schools can best support the emotional well-being and mental health of all pupils. Something we're trying to develop at the moment across Gwent, and with Monmouthshire as a part of that, is what we call whole school approaches to mental health and emotional well-being. And what we mean when we say a whole school approach is how we're looking not just at saying, those are the kids with mental health needs, so let's send them off to someone to fix them with their mental health needs, but how are we trying to make sure that everything about what the school does, from how that child is greeted at the start of the day until the point at which they leave at the end of the school day, how every one of the school's policies and procedures and the stuff they do, how they manage issues around where there might be bullying, for example, how they manage their kind of homework policies, all different things, how all of those things are done with mental health and emotional well-being in mind. How all of those processes and policies, we're trying to think about how are we having these stuff that happens in school in a way that is supporting the mental health and the emotional well-being of all pupils. Now, within that approach, the approach that we're going to be taking moving forward quite quickly is to pilot, so to give a try to basically, in one of the clusters in Monmouthshire, so that would be a high school and the primary schools that feed that high school, working with the senior leadership team in that cluster to really try and understand where they're at the moment around mental health and emotional well-being, and how they are offering a whole school approach to supporting that. And with an important part of that, we recognise being the well-being of teachers as well, because actually if teachers have a crucial role to play in supporting pupils' well-being. If teachers are feeling completely stressed out of their mind, they're not going to be in a good place to do that. But so the approach we're looking to take is to work with the leaders of the schools in that clusters, understand where they're at the moment, to develop with them a plan for what would most improve as they feel that how they are delivering a whole school approach to support everyone's emotional well-being, and that includes with it where there is more targeted support for those pupils who might need some additional support, and that then we'll be saying to them, and what help do you need from us, from within health, within social care and within education, that you feel would most help us, that you feel would most help you to put that plan in place. Something that we're also seeing as a crucial part of that is we need to hear the voices of pupils in understanding what a whole school approach looks like. That's what I guess the conversations that Sarah would be really keen that you can have with her while you're having your lunch today can help us to feed into that. But one thing I would really want to know from today is how can we best be talking more to young people about what you want from schools that would best support your emotional well-being? Because if we're just talking to the leaders and are not talking to the pupils, you're the ones on the front line and the ones that we need to be helping, we're not going to get it right. So I would really, really welcome people's views, and I'm sure Sarah will be asking for that. How can we best be hearing your views and voices to shape our thinking about this? I hope that's a bit of a long answer. I hope that.
That's a good answer. Do we have any other questions from the room? Yes? Oh, I'll go to Theo first, because...
I was talking with some of our wellbeing learning and support officers in our school recently, and they've been made aware that their funding for their mental health training is being cut in September. And I was wondering if you have any say on that, and if so, why it's being cut when it's been identified as a key issue.
Don't know is unfortunately the honest answer, and I had seen that question actually come up in advance of today and had asked the question of a couple of colleagues within education, and they weren't completely sure what that is either. But if you're able to give me some more information about it, I'm happy to try and look into that. I guess what I would say is one of the things we know about is schools' budgets are extremely stretched. There is not a huge amount of money going around, and there is a risk that actually it's things like the stuff which supports mental health and emotional well-being that potentially takes the hit when schools have got to work out how do we provide education for our pupils with less money. Now actually that's completely bonkers, because if pupils' emotional well-being is not in a good place, they're not going to be in a place to thrive educationally. But it's really interesting if there is stuff. Now, it may be that that's something that particular school has chosen not to prioritise something that they were doing because there is something that they feel will support emotional well-being of pupils better. It may be that they've had to make a cut, and I don't know, but if you can give me some more details after, I'm really happy to look into that and try and find out some more. Is that all right?
So we're going to do one more from Menti, and we'll move in. How about this one? How are you planning to use renewable energy for building new houses, and how environmentally friendly will these houses be? So again, back to the housing.
I think that one's back to me again, unless Ian or Rachel want to chip in. So most housing, I saw one of the other questions on there about how will the housing be funded. It kind of wraps up in this. Most housing is delivered by private companies. Companies you've probably seen, like Barratt, Persimmon, Taylor Wimpey, Redrow. They build houses, people buy them. They're a private company making a profit. There's policies we have about affordable housing, which is relevant to the question, because we have a far greater say about the standards of those houses. There's Welsh Government criteria that control the size of them, and also around the energy efficiency and the garden spaces and the like. So we have quite good control over those, and we're very good control over those. The rest of the housing that isn't the affordable stuff is what we call market housing, and it's pretty much just left to these companies to build what they think they'll sell. So one of the key drivers is actually you and your parents. Your parents as current customers, you as future customers. They will build what people will buy. So if there starts being a greater demand for these things, that will start to shift some behaviour. One of the other things that happens is building control that I mentioned earlier. I talked about structural safety, fire safety. They also control energy efficiency. So the Welsh Government sets those standards and they're reviewing those at the moment. So there's a particular part of building regs that sets the energy efficiency and carbon levels of new build, both homes and commercial buildings, and the Welsh Government's actively looking at making those more stringent. I've heard that one of the proposals might be to make homes by 2025, every new home will need to be near carbon neutral. But what near carbon neutral means, we don't know. So there's some of the tools that we have. In terms of renewable energy, so the specific question, our new plan will have to have actual sites allocated or identified for things like solar farms. But the actual homes themselves, we're looking at whether there should be policies looking at the actual renewable energy on the build themselves. You'd think, and people often say to us, well, surely it's an easy win. You're building a building, stick some solar panels on the roof. It's there. It's easy to do. That's largely, again, at the moment, driven by the market. So being quite blunt about it, a private company, when they sell me a house, once it's sold, it's my issue, not theirs. It's not really that interesting to them how much it costs me to live there for the rest of my life, what my energy bills are. So that kind of attitude needs to change a bit. We need to go from the scenario where people are always asking when they buy a house, what are the school catchments like? Typically now asking about what's the broadband connectivity like, to asking how much does it cost to live here in the future? How is it powered? And some of those different things. But there might be some policy tools that we can include in the new plan, and that's all up for discussion.
Thank you for that. Next question we're actually going to ask as well is about knife crime. It's how do you plan to restrict the use and purchase of knives? And if so, how do you plan to do that? So I'm assuming that would be police.
Okay, so in response to that question, there are restrictions on the use and sale of knives. Obviously, young people aren't allowed to buy knives. And in terms of carrying a knife, there's legislation there that is effective. So there's no plans, to my knowledge, unless Mike knows different, nationally to adjust the knife crime legislation. Certainly sanctions have increased recently in terms of the custodial sentence people can receive for possessing a knife. But I think it's probably worth understanding the circumstances when people may lawfully possess a knife. If it's part of somebody's religious culture, then it's lawful to possess a knife. If it's part of somebody's employment, such as a carpenter or somebody who is involved in forestry removal, they may need a knife. So there are circumstances where possession of a knife is permitted. So there isn't any national change, and certainly our local approach to knife crime is driven by the national sort of agenda towards it. So I don't know who asked that, but I hope that answers your question. Have you got anything additional?
No, nothing to add.
Oh, okay.
Do we have any more questions from the from the room? Madison, what do you want to say?
How will you resolve the crisis of knife crime?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. That's a really important question, and I'm really, really glad you asked it, because the way that you phrased that around there being a crisis of knife crime, that perception of there being a crisis is, I would suggest, wholly driven by the media, the national media. And nationally, we see terrible incidents involving knives, horrendous injuries, gang cultures that exist across the UK in big city areas. A lot of those have links to knife crime, and we're unfortunately seeing, again reported in the media, the loss of life of young people and more mature adults through knife crime. So that perception of knife crime needs to be addressed in each sort of location across the UK, coupled up with some very tough approaches and probably some very focused, specific policing operations to actually address it. But what I'd like to do is provide the reassurance for everybody in the room that there is 100% definitely not a crisis of knife crime across Monmouthshire. So you can all take a big, deep sigh of relief. I can understand there being a perception that knife crime is an issue everywhere because that's how it's been driven by the media and by social media. But across Monmouthshire, there is certainly no crisis. I may be sort of bleeding into other questions here. I shouldn't perhaps use the phrase bleeding. That might have been the wrong thing to say. But crossing... I did, yeah, for effect. Crossing over into other questions that may be raised, and I'll just touch on it. Across knife-related incidents in Monmouthshire are the lowest across the county of Gwent by a significant margin. I've seen that there's some other knifey type questions up there, so I'll hold back because I'm sure you've all got a lot more sort of knife-related questions to ask, or I can round up at the end if you'd like that in some form of summary. But in summary of your question, that locally in Monmouthshire, certainly no crisis of knife crime. I think that it is an issue for the national government, though, to perhaps look at approaches in the bigger city areas and what they're going to do, such as the Metropolitan Police, the London area. Okay, does that answer your question? Great.
Right. Do you want to ask a question over there?
Why is night crime a problem? Yeah.
I think knife crime, as I sort of suggested earlier, it's not a problem in Monmouthshire, get that out there straight away. But I think nationally it is a problem. Widely reported about the horrendous incidents that we see. And I think what's happened is that gang cultures in bigger cities where they sort their differences out, usually there's a level of violence attached to it. Some of that is the use of knives. And that in itself then fuels young people to become worried about getting embroiled in such an incident, and they may think that they need to possess a knife themselves, so that in turn if somebody were to try and attack them, they've got something to defend themselves, and that's wholly the wrong approach. But that is possibly why knife crime is a problem. Okay.
If we take another question... Why do you think knife crime was one of the main points chosen?
So, I can understand why knife crime is one of the main points chosen, I think, because it was asked, why do I think that? And again, I think it's all down. When we had the sort of whatever it was called earlier, the group exercise, when we were agreeing and disagreeing, and we had questions around social media, does it make you lonely or not? I do think that knife crime, social media is making more of a problem of knife crime because of the horrendous images that young people have access to, and perhaps that's something that should be age-related when we talked about that as well. And there's a lot to be said around the perceptions of knife crime and how social media pushes it forward, balanced against what's factually reported in the national media. So that probably is why I think knife crime is a problem. And you've also got to understand the category of knife crime. If somebody says, I'm going to pick up a knife and stab you, which is a very threatening thing to say, that would itself possibly be recorded as a knife crime when there's no knife physically involved. It's just a threat to use a knife. But all of this gets categorized under a knife crime type of incident. So again, it just keeps building momentum and developing into a bigger picture than what I'd like it to be, certainly. And it definitely fuels the fear of being involved in knife crime.
Yeah, I agree with what Richie says. You see it on the news every day, don't you? It was on the news today. We see some of the horrendous incidents that happen in some of our bigger cities. So we see what's happening in London, in Manchester, and in Birmingham. But as Richie said in his previous answer, there are 43 police forces in England and Wales, and there are only 2 other forces that have a lower level of knife crime than Gwent Police, and that is Surrey and Sussex. So we're very lucky that we don't have the knife crime issues that you see on the news in London and in Manchester and in Birmingham, which is a positive story.
Ask something, and I know this is cheating slightly actually to ask a question because you're meant to be asking us questions, but it's really interesting for me seeing how many questions there are up there about knife crime and hearing Richard, the Chief Inspector of Gwent Police, saying, actually in Monmouthshire, this isn't a big issue. Does that surprise? I'm really interested in because clearly there's a perception of a crisis of knife crime. Are people surprised when they hear Richard saying, actually in Monmouthshire this isn't a huge issue, or does that kind of fit with what you were thinking anyway?
Or even in Gwent.
Or even in Gwent, actually.
You know, one of the lowest forces in England and Wales.
Who would say they're surprised when they hear Richard and Mike saying, actually, this isn't a huge issue, certainly in Monmouthshire and even in Gwent? Can we have a show of hands for who is surprised to hear that? So a few hands. I'll not ask any more questions, though, because that isn't really...
I think those people are big social media users and on the internet, linked to the question earlier.
People with anger issues might unite. People with mental health might unite.
Can I say something about that? Because I think there is sometimes worries, and I think mental health, people have sometimes worried that people with mental health problems are kind of a mad axemen, if you like, or knife men, but who might attack people. And actually what we know from lots of research has shown is that actually where people have severe mental health problems, they're much more a risk to themselves, far more often actually than they are a risk to other people. But I think again, because sometimes there have been very high profile things in the media where people with mental health have harmed other people, there can often be a lot of worries that then feeds into, and a perception that people with mental health needs are dangerous, when actually we know the evidence says not so much really. But it's a helpful question. So I can see lots of hands raised.
I myself don't see the problem, but is there a certain area in Monmouthshire, would you say, that more incidents happen?
I like the way you framed the question. What I would say in response to that is not a geographical area such as Caldicot, Abergavenny. The incidence is so low that the most prevalent area is actually within the home. So the knife-related incidents we've got recorded across Monmouthshire, at least half of them are within the home. And I say half of them, and that's half of a very low figure. So there's such a low number, I could not say that most of the knife-related incidents are in a certain geographical spot, because that would be very unfair to then perhaps, I don't know, identify, label, whatever you want to call it, an area of Monmouthshire, because there is no one specific place that has it more than another. But the most prevalent area is within the home, usually within a domestic sort of dispute type setting. Okay.
And those numbers are very low. In a 12-month period, it's probably 13 or 14 incidents in 12 months that we've responded to that involve any form of knife or bladed article or sharp instrument. And as Richard said, 7 or 8 of those, over half, are things that happen behind closed doors, not on the street.
Okay.
So do you want to take one from the back over there? Yeah. Yeah, sorry. I was just going to ask how you think you're going to deal with sex education within the schools, because I know for a fact that we haven't ever had, we had a day the other day, but we haven't ever had any sex education on how you can deal with STDs or pregnancies, or if you feel like you need to speak to someone. The only person that we feel that we could have spoken to in the school is the nurse, and not everyone wants to speak to someone that's a lot older than us, or someone, that's like anywhere near our age. And we don't feel like we've had enough education on these topics to be able to understand what you want to do and where you feel like you need to go. And also education on how, if you have, for example, if you are pregnant, what your options are and what you can do to respond to the certain situation that you're in. Because we don't feel like we've had really any education on that whatsoever. So, yeah, that's my question.
I'm not sure who it's aimed at, but I've got a firm view on what the police response should be. There's a question up on the board there around police visibility. I'm really clear on the police can't be everything to everyone. And I have had the portfolio for schools policing for a number of years. And I do question whether it is the role of policing to deliver sex education within a school environment. I think it certainly should be on the PSHE curriculum. But those topics that you spoke about, I would question whether it is the responsibility of a police officer giving those lessons. So I'm going to hand over to health, maybe.
Yeah, actually, the response from health, as things stand at the moment, would be the same, because it is the schools that actually deal with the sex education. So there isn't, generally speaking, any involvement from the health board in that process. We
Apart
obviously,
from the school health, the school nurses, I guess, who are part of.
The school nurse will be there to speak to if an individual wanted to speak to them. But what we do have within health is the response system via people's own doctors for anybody who has an issue to go and actually talk to their own doctor about it. Your general doctor and your GP.
No, but also, like, if you have an issue, the really only person you can speak to is your GP. So should there not be some kind of, like, clinic or, like, something you can go to a certain area? Like, for example, if you have a mental health problem, there's places that you can go. Should there not be, because it comes under the issue of mental health, should there not be a place that you can go to and things that you can do if you feel like you have that issue?
Are you thinking about family planning services? Is that what you mean? Or just general?
Just more like
counselling, support?
education, somewhere you can go. For example, if you need to speak to someone about issues around sex, like if you feel like you have an STD or you feel like you're pregnant, there should be people that you should be able to speak to, that aren't just people in school, like more people outside. Like instead of just only being able to speak to your GP, you should be able to maybe go to a clinic or something, because we don't really have any of them.
Right.
One thing that the question makes me think of is, I was saying earlier on at slightly tedious length probably about that we're trying to develop whole school approaches to emotional well-being in schools, and what you were saying actually was that actually that's something, of course, that is going to affect someone's mental health and emotional well-being, isn't it? If there are issues of that kind that they're not able to get support with. This is where I think we need to be making sure we're hearing from the perspective of young people, in terms of your emotional well-being, what's the stuff that schools need to have on their radar? What's the stuff they need to be thinking about? And we then need to be feeding that into our planning of how we do try and develop whole school approaches to support emotional well-being. So I think it's a really helpful point. And I'm surprised, to be completely honest, to hear that there are schools where there is not any sex education happening. See a number of hands. I don't want to point at anyone. Is that your?
Yeah. Lydia, at the back, yes?
Along the same theme of mental health, I was wondering if there's anywhere that young people can go to get help with a diagnosis without, like, their parents knowing or guardians with them.
Mental health. Yeah.
I think that is me, and that's quite a challenging and complicated one actually. I guess that one of the things that we know is that I suppose that actually that parents being plugged into and able to support the issues that where a child has issues with their emotional well-being or mental health, and being able to support that effectively is really, really important. Parents have an important part to play. And also, there will be situations where a young person has issues they want to talk about that they do not want their parents to know about. Now, actually, I'm not completely sure, but my guess is that I would be fairly confident-ish that within the school-based counselling service, that where somebody is accessing school-based counselling, that their parents don't necessarily know about that. I don't know if any of you know, but I might be wrong on that. I think there would be an issue around this, around whether that young person is felt to have the level of maturity to make those decisions about how they get the care that they get. And I think that if they are judged that actually they are competent, is the word that we use, which sounds like a slightly stupid word for it, but where they are able to make and to weigh up those decisions and are saying, I want confidential service and I don't want my parents to know about, that would be somebody who's at the older rather than younger end of, being up to 18, generally speaking. I think that services would not involve their parents in that, and I think that, you know, it would be really important that they're spelling out explicitly when they're accessing that support, I don't want my parents to know about this. Where the professional felt perhaps that there were issues that their parents really need to know about for that child's or young person's immediate safety, they may need to speak with other people about that. But I think there would be access to that kind of provision for where that's really important for the young person and they are felt to be in a position to make that decision.
Thank you for that. Sort of again with mental health, it's just because I've seen a few of the same question is about why do you think there's a rise in mental health cases in young people and like why it's been a rapid rise?
Yeah, this is a really hard one actually, and I was desperately trying to get on the phone on my way here to speak to a couple of colleagues who work in Monmouthshire who might have more information about this. I think that there's a lot of factors that feed into this. I think one issue is that there is an increase, and I know that actually in Monmouthshire that what's been running for a while is what's called the Early Help Panel, where a number of different services who support children and young people's mental health, they sit around a table together basically. So all of those requests for support, they go to one place, and then the professionals are sat around the table to work out who the best person to get involved is. And I know that the rate of referrals or requests for support there has risen significantly. I think that some of this probably is about an increased awareness and reduced stigma around mental health. I think people are more knowledgeable and comfortable raising mental health issues than has sometimes been the case in the past, where people would suffer in silence because there was such a sense of stigma and embarrassment around mental health needs. I think that there's lots of complex changes to society. There's austerity, the fact there isn't enough money in our public services. There's changes in terms of sort of family structures and wider changes in community. There is huge levels of pressure on young people often in our schools. There is social media. I was sat on the side that I'm not a massive fan of all social media myself, and I think it can create additional stresses. There's a number of complex factors that I think can all feed into that increased rate of mental health needs. I think it's also one of the things that it's hard for us to say sometimes what the level of demand on support services is, because our services have not always been very good at talking to each other. So knowing overall, is demand going up? But I'm pretty sure that it is, and I think it's some of those complicated factors that are feeding into it.
Thank you for that. Can I also quickly say, if you've got a question, can you try and like sort of tell us who you're directing it at as well? So.
And also, sorry to sound a little bit rude, but just so we can fit in as much questions from everyone as possible. Yeah, just keep it a little bit more concise. If I take one again from the audience, Ben, up there, if you...
How much of an issue is homelessness actually in Monmouthshire? Because you said knife crime isn't actually that much of an issue. How much of an issue is homelessness?
Who is that towards?
Just manoeuvre my way round. Homelessness is too big an issue in Monmouthshire, unfortunately. It's probably quite a hidden homelessness. But just to give you a feel, we had over 800 households approach us last year. We had 164 over April, May and June, and approximately a quarter of those approaches last year were from young people, particularly 18 to 24-year-olds. So in the context of Monmouthshire, that is a lot of demand, and it's very challenging for us to deal with that. What I would say is, though, of those 800 that approached us, that doesn't mean to say they were actually homeless. and wouldn't necessarily have been without accommodation. Often the perception of homelessness is about rough sleeping. Yes, we get a little bit of that, but most people that approach us, it's probably more of a housing problem rather than absolutely homelessness per se.
Just because of the point you just quickly made, there's a question here that is homelessness just about providing someone with a home?
Absolutely not. Many people that come through the door do want a property and do ask us for a property. But our starting point, wherever possible, is to try and prevent homelessness. And you can prevent homelessness through a whole host of mechanisms. And as been talked about with regards to mental health and knife crime, part of our job is to try and get to the root cause of that homelessness. Family breakdowns is very common with young people. Mental health is a problem for many people. So there are services in Monmouthshire that will help people's circumstances over and above a property. So we do have a young person's accommodation officer. Her name's Ruth Dare, and she will do anything and everything to help a young person with their housing needs. And we do have a lot of services. The majority of services in Monmouthshire are about helping people to either avoid homelessness or trying to find them accommodation rather than the actual physical part of providing a house.
I think if we have one more question, then we'll just have a really, really fast break to just get moving a little bit. So, how about you? Go on.
There's one problem with the education system. If you get a learning disability, you can't do DDRT. If you get a learning disability. You can't do DDRT if you get a learning disability. They won't let you do it. No, DDRT. Yeah, they won't let you. And I'm like, why can't I do DDRT? I can't stand how you think about it. Everybody else got it, but we would learn to believe. Yeah, that'd be allowed.
We haven't got anybody on the education to discuss that.
Okay.
So just one more, right at the top there from, just real fast.
Anybody who comes into contact with the police service, we're really fortunate. We've got an initiative. I was going to say new. It's not so new anymore. It's been embedded for well over a year. When we have contact of somebody requesting support from the police service, it goes into our first point of contact area, namely the force control room. Within that control room setting, I don't know if you've ever seen what it looks like. You've got a number of operators dispatching officers out to different calls. But with it, again, in that room, we have somebody constantly scanning the incident logs that come through to us, and it's an approved mental health worker. So it's an absolute amazing resource for us to have in that environment because depending on the nature of the opening text of the call, the officer going there isn't really going to be fully sighted on the needs or of the individual that's in a bit of a crisis. And they won't be able to think through in advance of getting there what other agencies they might need to support them there. And having that approved mental health worker in that control room environment setting allows to have some expert advice, fast time, delivered to the officer going there, and also the force incident manager who has to make sure that it's a proportionate level of response to that incident, they too have access to this expert sort of advice and knowledge. So you can almost sometimes, being as knife crime is a big issue here that we're talking about today, link the level of response and make sure that it's proportionate. If it's a knife-related call and you know that somebody's having a mental health issue or crisis, as a force incident manager, and I've performed that role for several years, you can make sure that that response is proportionate, so that when the officer gets there and comes into contact with the individual or the subject at the address, that they've got, whether they need to contact additional mental health services, whether a GP needs to go there, they can make all those necessary arrangements. If, under all the circumstances, it is proportionate to arrest the person for whatever they may have done, when they're brought into the custody environment, they will again be facilitated with access to a mental health worker, and in fact there's probably going to be a high-end specialist mental health practitioner there brought in to actually make sure that the person in custody is dealt with appropriately. So, it doesn't negate somebody being arrested if they've done something significantly serious, and it's proportionate that they are arrested, and it's for the safety of everyone. They're taken away from that environment and into a custody environment, but even there's ongoing support if somebody is having a mental health crisis. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Okay, we're going to be just taking a really short break now, and then we'll come back in a few minutes' time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Shout out to Caldecott Comprehensive. Whoop, whoop.
Hi.
We could all.
We should say, please don't.
We could all. Yeah, but we've got all the IP addresses for what they've written. Like anyway, so if we need to chase any racism and stuff like that.
Yeah, Hi. Hello. Hi, guys. Yeah, we're going to be starting questions again. So if we could all sort of settle down at Jade. So we want to start back off with questions in the room. So does anyone have any questions here? So, yeah, do you want to? Lloyd?
Do you think that a holistic and whole school approach to mental health and well-being will exclude those in anti-school subcultures towards mental health?
I think it's one of the things that we need to make sure is that we don't exclude the most vulnerable people. I'm going to try and be really short and punchy there, but you know, I think that's one of the important things, that actually if this is a whole school approach, that doesn't just mean for those people who feel really part of the school culture, and again, part of the work that we need to do around making sure the voices of pupils are shaping this, we need to be hearing some of the voices that we wouldn't normally hear with this kind of things. We need to be hearing from some of the kids who might have, you know, really struggle to engage with the school stuff, because otherwise it's not a whole school approach if it's not actually including the needs of everyone in the school. It's not about having a blanket fit. Anyway, I'm going to say no more because I'm going to try and be quick. Is that all right?
What about Sophie? Yeah.
I was thinking because a lot of people in the world have special needs, and we have the charities to help raise money for people that need a bit more help than others. But what I was thinking was parents especially worry that when their kids start to go to school and they start to learn and make friends and stuff, that it can cause bullying, because a lot of people, I don't know if this is the right term, but a lot of people, and parents especially, say their kids could get labelled at school for needing some extra support. So I was just wondering, for the mental health and the police, what would happen if the bullying was to start on people especially that need more help than others.
First, is again, the key thing is a whole school approach needs to be one which thinks about everyone who is within that school community, and ensuring that actually everyone is safe. I know that there is some work actually in some of the schools in Monmouthshire around restorative approaches where there are issues with bullying, which kind of basically are about trying to bring the two people together to try and have a conversation and to understand where each other's coming from, which have been found to be really helpful. So ensure that actually that people who may feel different and feel that they don't fit in don't get marginalised, excluded, bullied.
From my perspective, as a service, we don't really get involved a great deal around bullying issues. Our school beat officers are obviously there to support the school in relation to anything that they'd wish them to become involved in. So they may support schools in terms of mediation around bullying issues, but it's not really something that as a service we get involved with. But what I would say is that we do try and support agencies that want to introduce schemes within schools. I know that our PCC is, sorry, I shouldn't use abbreviations, Police and Crime Commissioner, is very supportive of projects that would address issues such as bullying within the school environment. So on that front, I would say watch this space, because there might be something coming out in the future.
Thank you for that. Can we also just quickly ask if anyone's got any questions for Bronwyn, who's the head of Nyren Bevan Health Board? Anyone? Any other questions anyone's got? Oh.
Does she know if there's going to be an accident and emergency opening in Monmouth? Because if there's like an accident, which could be mental health or not, you'd have to drive up to Abergavenny, and there's usually quite long waits.
Okay, the system for emergency help for people is quite complex. The new Specialist and Critical Care Centre for Gwent is being built at the moment just by Lamfretford Grange Hospital on the roundabout near police headquarters. You've probably seen it as you've gone down the A4042 between Abergavenny and Newport. It's a massive new building. That is due to open in 2022. that will mean that anybody who has a very serious accident or health crisis from all over Gwent will go to that new unit, and there will be still support units provided at the Royal Gwent Hospital, Neville Hall Hospital in Abergavenny, and also Ystrad Mynach in the hospital at Ystrad Mynach, which has been open for about 3 or 4 years now. Very local services are not safe for professional staff to work in because they see such low numbers of people who've had accidents and have got emergencies, a huge variety of things that people need urgent help for. So the safest way for that to be provided is within units where there is specialist support immediately available. So if you have a physical health crisis, say you have a heart attack or you have a road accident and you need urgent help, that needs to be provided in centres where there's a lot of expertise. A local service in Monmouth, in Chepstow, in anywhere really, in the whole of Gwent, can only be provided where it's for specific things that you can get safe local support. So there are local community mental health teams, for example, already sited throughout Monmouthshire. There's one that covers North Monmouthshire, so that will cover Abergavenny and Monmouth and the area in between, and one in the south that does the same thing. So people who need urgent help, that would be the route that would be provided through. And of course your GPs are always there. So if there is something really urgent, your GP is there between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m, wherever your GP practices, and there are, I think, 13 GP practices in Monmouthshire now. And there is also an out-of-hours service. So if somebody has an urgent need out of hours, that's also available wherever you are in Monmouthshire. Hope that helps.
And we're going to be taking one from Menti, which is how will the LDP plan support farmers in Monmouthshire?
I might pass to Rach for a bit of support on this one. There's a bit of work that hasn't yet been done in terms of what some of the policies look like, but probably there's two different aspects. In terms of, without boring you too much detail, actually just farming isn't something that needs planning permission. So a farmer doesn't need planning permission to grow crops or change growing crops to grazing cattle or anything. So a lot of what they do can happen without us. So this plan isn't actually relevant to them. Where it becomes relevant is in terms of diversification. So if they need to expand their business in different ways, for example, tourism accommodation, or some business units, or turning some old barns into houses to help sustain their business, that's certainly where we come in. So it's looking at those policies to try and make sure they're supportive without, as someone was saying earlier, without spoiling the things that make Monmouthshire so special and some of the countryside. There's some huge unknowns around Brexit and what that's going to mean for agriculture and farming communities, but it is a really important part of Monmouthshire, an important part of our economy and our identity. So we're certainly looking at that carefully.
So are there any more questions that are in the room? Madison?
How could schools reduce bullying that is aimed at kids with mental health?
It's aimed at kids with mental health needs. I think it again, I'm sounding like a broken record here, aren't I? But I think it feels like that's a really important part of a whole school approach to mental health and emotional well-being. Includes those, whether we call them relationship policies, bullying policies, whatever they are, and how we're ensuring that they are, the right ones that are supporting young people, and ensuring that how schools develop a culture which is accepting of everyone and everyone's difference, and that includes whether there are mental health needs, additional learning needs, whatever those needs are. That, for me, is what a whole school approach that supports well-being is one in which everyone's difference and uniqueness is kind of welcomed and embraced in the school, and how the policies then really support that.
Do we have any other questions? I see quite a few up there. So, Rhiannon?
With a significant reduce in pastoral staff in schools, how would a whole school approach to mental health be implicated within, say, Chepstow? Because we're very, very low on pastoral staff, and so I'm just unsure as how the culture of the school will be changed with pretty much 4 or 5 pastoral staff, seemingly.
I guess in a whole school approach, everyone has their part to play. Pupils, every member of the school staff, parents, or also within the school. But I think I'm not able to answer that question really specifically. I guess what I am able to say is that's some of the work that when this piece of work starts and we identify which is the pilot, the test area, if you like, in Monmouthshire that we're trying this, it's getting our heads together with those leaders of the schools within that area to work out, so how can we do this with the resources that you've got, and also if there's clear things that actually to take forward, to do stuff that is going to make for a better mental health and emotional well-being support for kids in that school and everyone in that school, there is not enough resources. Well, maybe we need to be saying, so what exactly do we need that would enable that school's plan to move forward? That's a really unspecific answer because I can't answer specifically. But
maybe that's something though that
to plug Sarah again, I think these are some of the questions which I think Sarah will be really wanting to get your thoughts on around how we can take this forward.
So, any other questions? Do you want to back the corner?
This is for the housing people. Would you say that sustainable and eco-friendly development is one of your top priorities in your new scheme, or is there other issues that you'd say more important?
Sometimes it feels like we're juggling a million priorities. But yes, the sustainability of new development has to be at the centre. Sustainability has always been something that planning focuses on anyway, but the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act makes that even more important. So even if we didn't want to, which we do, we have to. So that means, looking at where things are built, what services are there, how do we reduce the need for people to travel, how are things actually built. So yeah, it's going to have to be a top priority.
Just because we seem to have like a massive upsurge of questions in the room. Any others? Or Megan.
What do you think that the main reason for child homelessness is?
The main reason for child homelessness is family breakdowns, and it's quite often as simple as rows with parents that can unfortunately often escalate. Sometimes it's more than that. Obviously, a big responsibility for us is to keep young people safe, whether it's through housing or possibly through social services. But it's that family environment that generally is the main reason.
We're just going to take one from Menti again, and that was towards the Mental Health Board, which is how have teachers been trained for anxiety and stress?
I am not an expert on what training teachers have had exactly with regard to anxiety and stress. What I can say is that in 2 areas of Gwent, this isn't Monmouthshire, that's something that we've been taking forward with new Welsh Government money has been what's called a school mental health in-reach approach, because Welsh Government are saying actually teachers have a really important part to play in supporting the emotional well-being and mental health of kids, and this isn't something that they, one, have had much training necessarily in, and 2, it's not necessarily something they get easy access to support with. They have teachers have really important relationships with their pupils, and that I guess they're often people who are well placed to be able to support pupils, but we need to make sure that they both, we're making sure that both they have some of the knowledge and skills that can not be trying to turn them into mental health experts, but can help them to be able to support pupils within their role as a teacher, and also that make sure they've got someone who is an easy to access kind of go-to if they're saying, actually, I want to talk about, there's this child that I'm quite concerned about, and I'd like to know what might be, is there anything that I can do, or are there other services that I might need to access? We need to make that kind of support much more accessible.
So, any other questions in the room? Yeah, Dylan?
I know we talked about knife crime not being as much of an issue in our local area as it is elsewhere, but I just wanted to ask, how big of an issue is crime in general in Monmouthshire, and what are some of the leading types of crime?
Yeah, well, we've been warned in the break to keep our answers really short, and so I'll try and be as concise as possible. Monmouthshire, statistically, is probably one of the safest counties in England and Wales, so crime is very, very low across the whole of Monmouthshire. Rural crime, which is your area of work, would probably be a concern for us in Monmouthshire. We don't have a nighttime economy as such. We don't have big towns and cities in Monmouthshire that we need to be concerned about. But I suppose in answer to your question, I mean, it would be probably the rural crime that would be a concern. And in the last 12 months, we've established a rural crime team that you lead on, Rich.
Yeah. So yeah, the rural crime team was established to actually reach out into rural communities, and obviously Monmouthshire is very much a rural community. And they're there to support a lot of the farming sort of communities and those people who are or have previously felt quite isolated and out on a limb, for want of a better phrase. And what my experience has been in terms of crime types in Monmouthshire is that there's never a big volume of any crime type, but you'll have a spike of a certain type of crime. And it's not the people of Monmouthshire, it's people coming into Monmouthshire. So we may have had recently a spike in commercial burglary, which basically means shop premises being broken into. And you will have people travelling, like I say, from outside of Gwent even sometimes, who see Monmouthshire as, for want of a better phrase, easy target, because they think everybody there is happy, which they are. And that is the only, if I were to pinpoint any particular type of crime, which is a rural crime because it includes theft of agriculture, etc., within the farming setup. So that type of commercial burglary crime would be the more prevalent, but as Mike has said, it's very low across the board.
Sasha, you had a question?
I know it was previously said that helping people with homelessness isn't just about providing them with a home, with a house, but how do you help them make it into a home and improve their lives? It's not just a physical house that helps them.
That's a good question, because a lot of our resources are obviously about the actual bricks and mortar. But again, I think that's where there are a number of agencies in Monmouthshire that will support people, because there are some people that are accommodated that have no possessions. It's not too often, but every now and again it does happen. But there's recycling agencies, homemakers in Abergavenny, and there's one in Newport that we will help people access. We'll support people to. There's a fund called the Discretionary Assistance Fund, where people can apply for money for essential things such as a fridge, a cooker. We've also got members of staff who will contact or liaise with charities. There's a charity called the Vickers Fund, and again they will make benevolent donations to individuals, to help them, with essential items, whatever those items are. So that's just a few examples, but yes, there are agencies and there is support around there in that regard. Mothers Union in Monmouth Town as well are very good at helping people equip people's homes.
Thank you for that. Who else has got a question? Then, yeah, at the back.
Is there going to be more funding for homeless shelters for women? Because I know that there's a massive one in Cardiff and they bring a lot in Wales, but is there going to be more funding for that? Because I feel like we've had a lot of education on the shelter. I think it's Lamai that do one for women. Is there going to be more funding for that, and is there going to be more support for that?
In Monmouthshire, we've got one. There's one shelter, which is for women. Just completely by coincidence, we've been written to by Welsh Government, inviting us to bid for funding for a possible facility. It's not prescriptive, so it could be any type of facility that supports women and domestic abuse. So we're currently working with a number of agencies. There's an agency called Cavanal, who we are asking what do they think would be good for Monmouthshire, and we will hopefully make a bid, and we see where we go. There's no guarantees though that those bids are always successful, because there'll be a limited pot of money, and we will genuinely be in competition with other parts of Wales, which is why it's really important that we can actually say this is the situation in Monmouthshire and this is why we need that extra or different facility.
There's one coming now. What has been done in the past year to, with anything to do with knife crime, like any improvements in Monmouthshire for young people?
What I would say is over the past year, in order to understand the knife crime picture across Gwent, the head of CID actually commissioned a report into the levels of knife crime across all of Gwent, and obviously Monmouthshire features within that report. And that partially was to make sure that as a police service we were doing what we could to combat knife crime, understand where it's happening and what we should do to reduce it further. So what we've done in terms of Monmouthshire, we won't be doing anything because if we were to do something such as hold a knife amnesty, clearly everyone's going to think that there is a knife crime issue, and when you haven't got an issue, there's no point in holding a knife amnesty. So we're not going to do anything that actually further drives a fear of something that doesn't exist. So hopefully that answered your question.
So could I ask that sort of same vein of question to the mental health and homelessness areas? Like what has been done in the past year to help with homelessness in Monmouthshire?
I think you'd have to be living under a rock to know that young people haven't been saying that mental health is a problem nationwide, not even Monmouthshire. So what kind of projects is there that are currently happening that these kids could know about?
We are putting a lot more focus now on youth homelessness in Monmouthshire. I mentioned earlier that we've got a lady who provides dedicated housing support for young people, and that's a project that's about a year old. We are looking to develop our accommodation especially for young people. Again, you might you may be aware that there are some there's some accommodation in Abergavenny and there's some in Chepstow, especially for young people under 24. Now that is that's a particular model, and that doesn't always help everybody's needs. So we are looking to identify a possible alternative for Monmouthshire, and I think somebody mentioned Llamai earlier, and that's one of the agencies we're talking to, because they do specialise in working with young people, and there is it's not so much new, but there is dedicated housing support out there for young people. There's again, Llamai provide a service called CHIPS, which is which is dedicated to young people. But I would suspect over the next year, particularly, we will have really revisited the services that we provide for young people, and hopefully we'll provide we can really improve provision for young people. We've just in addition to that, we're working with Monmouthshire Housing, who have purchased a property for the council, and we're going to be using that. Hopefully, it's got to get planning permission yet, but that is a property that we are looking to use for families. So obviously children will benefit for that, and that's a dedicated facility for families. And say that I would imagine that will come online during the summer.
Can I just say quickly for mental health, I think Jade, sorry, you'd said yes, you'd be living under a rock not to clock that there have been a lot of concerns about mental health around, and I've not been living under a rock. So I think some of the kind of key developments from a Monmouthshire perspective around young people's mental health, one has been the expansion of what we call the early help panel, which is a kind of an approach where we say all of the different services who are supporting children and young people's emotional well-being and mental health, they sit round a table on a weekly basis, request for support, go into one place, and you've got then those different services. You can try and work out who they think is the most appropriate service to support, so that young people, children and families get the right help first time. Sarah is part of our newly expanded community psychology team, which has been a recent development across Gwent, and that Sarah is the Monmouthshire community psychologist, which is a new team which is around trying both to support the community, if you like, of frontline staff who are working with vulnerable children and young people, and also who are going to be moving into trying to support communities directly around what they can put in place, and how having psychological expertise available to them can help them to put in place in terms of things to improve children's emotional well-being. There has been a recent development in Monmouthshire, the rollout of a service that supports some of the most children with the most severe and complex needs in Monmouthshire, that often traditionally these young people, where services really struggle to meet their needs locally, they've been sent to out-of-area placements, which we now actually haven't delivered very effective outcomes often for those young people, and have been extremely expensive, and that there's work to try and really improve that provision locally, so that those most vulnerable and complex children can be supported to stay in areas. Developments around getting psychological expertise into our early years systems to support our health visitors and other early years staff, to support mums and their babies understanding the impact of those important early relationships and how to support them. So there's quite a lot happening, and quite a lot more is going to be happening over the next year or more.
Can I just add to that one of the things that we are doing is working in partnership across all the agencies in Monmouthshire to try to make sure that we improve children's emotional health and well-being. There is an action plan which has been developed on behalf of the Public Services Board, which I won't bore you with, but basically it's a statutory requirement that the agencies work together. We have developed an action plan, and there are some key things happening within that. One of them is, as Luke said, the development of specific support, the early help panel, the transformation programme for the child and adolescent mental health service are part of that delivery plan. There are also other things that we're doing to try to bring services for children and young people together so that we have an integrated approach across all the agencies. And we've opened recently a wellbeing hub at Chepstow Community Hospital, which is the start of an approach to try to develop services on a place basis, which is an approach we've been doing for older people for quite some time. We're planning to run a pilot at Caldicot. We've had some money given to us by Welsh Government because it hasn't been tried anywhere in Wales before. But we're trying to develop an integrated children and young people's service where professionals work together and where voluntary services also work with the professionals and with children and young people to deliver a service that's without the boundaries between services, if that makes sense. At the moment, people get handed off from one organisation to another depending on what their needs are. And we want to try to do it on a place basis so that you would get a seamless service when you go in there. So whatever your issues are, we would be able to address those by people working together behind the scenes so that you see one person and that person can help you navigate the system more easily, because we know that is a big problem for people. Hope that explains it well. There are lots of other actions that we're doing as well, but I think that's probably the main one, apart from what's already been mentioned.
I might be able to help a little bit with that, because we do get people being released from prison, and as you say, from rehab, and we're asked to provide accommodation. And again, there are support agencies out there that will work with individuals to help in whether it's life skills or employment and training. And again, going back to that agency called Clamai, they run a service called Emphasis. And Emphasis it's not necessarily about people that have got a criminal problem, but it's young people that are that have got barriers to getting into the workplace or barriers into training, and a criminal background or an offending background might be part of that. But that agency will work with those people to try and support them in that regard. I think we do. I think it would be good to have a little bit more of that type of service in Monmouthshire, because you're absolutely right. Those people that have got those that disadvantage is not helpful. So, but yeah, there is a bit of support out there in that regard.
Okay, we're going to be taking another one from Menti, which is, if homelessness is such a problem, then why aren't we exploiting all of the abandoned and unused buildings which are currently being used, often to hide criminal activity?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There is an expectation at a Welsh Government level, and indeed some of the councillors in Monmouthshire are very interested in how we can bring empty homes back into use. There are statistically several hundred empty homes in Monmouthshire. The majority of those, though, are people perhaps waiting to sell a property. Somebody might have died and it forms part of somebody's estate and will. So again, there's could well be complications around that. But there are a number of properties that are standing empty that potentially could come back into use. We're actually doing a piece of work at the moment, and the council's made a decision to actually try and do more. So one of my team has done a survey of Abergavenny High Street, and we've been looking to identify space above shops. You know, is there anything that can be used as accommodation? It is a challenge. It's not straightforward, because even if we find a property that potentially could be used as a home, we've either got to persuade the landlord or the owner to do something with it. If we can't persuade them, we might have to force them to do it. How easy it is to do that, it's not straightforward. And equally, once you've done that, there could be cost implications to make a property safe or suitable for somebody to live in. And again, there's not necessarily a pot of money sat around waiting to fund that type of work. But it is something that we are looking at, and I think it's probably fair to say that at this stage we are seeking to identify opportunities, and having identified those opportunities, let's see how we can find some solutions for those.
So if we just take one more question before we break for lunch. Hannah at the top.
It's kind of two parts, but the first one's yes or no, and it's for the Mental Health Board. Would you say that increase in drug usage for youths is related to the mental health decline? Just yes or no? Yeah, as a form of escapism. And earlier you stated that the school system is a factor of mental health and stress levels. So I was wondering if from this we could assume that schooling and education and the system that we go through is a cause of drug abuse as we're pushed towards it to escape like the pressures of society.
One thing that really struck me, one of my children at school, they'd recently had to fill in a questionnaire for something about the teacher, about how things are in the classroom. All of the class had to do that. And the teacher had come back to them afterwards and said, no, I'm not happy with some of your responses. You need to change these responses. And it made me think, blimey, how much pressure, how scrutinised does that teacher feel that they are saying when there is, you know, something which is asks young people their views, that teacher feels so anxious about how that will reflect on them and how they will be judged on it, that they say, no, you need to go back and change your answers. There feels huge pressure on teachers, pressure on head teachers, I'm sure, pressure on pupils. Is that unhelpful, and does that contribute to mental health difficulties, substance misuse? Yeah, I think it probably does. I also think they're complex things which have many factors leading in. See, I'd be able to turn it into a slightly long-winded, vague answer rather than the yes, no. But I think there's a degree of, there's some truth in what you're saying.
Respond. I just think it's kind of backwards how the education system is like, drugs are bad, don't use drugs. And then at every corner when you're like, I need help, I don't like how life is going right now, they're like, oh, sucks to be you, talk to your parents. You know what I mean? So then you talk to your parents and they're like, have you notified the officials at school? And it's just a back and forth, where the only thing to break it is finding something that can take you out of the reality that you're in. And I don't think it's right that is what education propels us towards. Obviously, not the topics that we're learning, that's not what I'm on about. I mean, how it's portrayed upon us.
Something that we've talked a lot about with me and colleagues in terms of mental health provision is it feels like there is sometimes a refer-on culture, that kind of thing, what you describe. You go and talk to them, you go and talk to them, they say you go and talk to them, go and talk to them, they say you go and talk to them. What we don't have, I think, is really good access to the kind of support for the staff on the front line, including teachers as part of that, that allows them to hold on rather than to pass on. The handoffs, as Bron was talking about it. And I think that's something that we need to get much better, and we're really committed within, sort of leads within health, social care and education, is how we can move away from that someone else's problem, go over there kind of culture, to making sure people have got the right support available to them that allows them to say, if you've come to me with help, I want to be the first person to try and help you. I want to pull in the support that I need to be able to help you, rather than just saying, go over there, they'll fix it for you. I think it's a really helpful question.
Buffet update, they're taking off the wrappings now.
Just to finish up, do you guys at the front have any questions for the young people here today? Just as a nice finish.
I'd be interested to know if you've got any views about Monmouthshire's homeless service. Have you got any? Do you hear anything or experience? Yeah, the food banks are they're quite busy in Monmouthshire at the moment, and yes, a lot of homeless people benefit from the food banks. A lot of agencies will collect food from the food banks and take it to families around the county, and that does include homeless people. I'm not the best person to answer that, but the council's social services department has that responsibility, and they will make sure that children will be safe and looked after, and they have a number of different mechanisms, but it does include like foster parents that you're obviously aware of.
I've got a question, if I can, and I don't know if it's to this side of the room or to that side of the room, but you've asked loads of really interesting questions. You've stayed incredibly focused, because we've been here quite a long time actually, and everyone's really kind of focused incredibly well. So for me, as we're looking to develop how we look at how mental health and emotional well-being services for children and young people change, we want the voice of young people feeding into that. I want to know, and I think there's 1,000,001 questions which I'm not going to ask now, but I do want to know, what are some of the best ways that we can be ensuring your voice feeds into our thinking about this? And I don't know if these are questions that perhaps conversation we can have.
Over lunch, we're all going to be mingling anyway, so everybody's here is going to get lunch together, and I would like it if you would take the opportunity to have these discussions. You all know each other now.
But I think we'd also be... Go on, Sarah.
And then finally, over the lunch break, we are also asking you your opinions on what topics we're going to be having for September. So this year we've done it a bit differently. Last year you had a little purple ballot that said 10 priorities on, and that was made by the British Youth Council for the whole of the UK. What we want to do this year is attach another 10 to that for Monmouthshire. She'll be voted on a national scale and a local scale. We don't know what 10 priorities we should put on our ballot for Monmouthshire. So if you have any issues or any topics that you would like to see in the next year's ballot, please get them down on the flip chart that I'm going to put out in the canteen as well. Does that make sense? Go for it.
Sorry, this is probably the last one. But my question back to you, and it isn't one for you to answer now, just to have a think about, and we'll try and get the answers from you another time. But for you, what makes Monmouthshire special? Do you want to live and work here when you've left school? And do you feel like you'll be able to live and work here? And if the answer is no to that last question, what can we do to change that? So just have a think about that.
Cool. Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Have we got any year 7s in the room? Fab. Come and see me over lunch. I've got something for you.
You're not in trouble. Right.
Fab. Okay. Let's do lunch.
Thank you, Luke. I would not have been able to do that on my own, because you've got a far better knowledge of the services than me.
But actually, I think it was good that because there were areas where I wouldn't have also likewise been able to.
It makes a big difference. So when
glad to be able to look to you.
It's a good job you came actually
and you've become the head of the entire health board as well.
Well, the head for Monmouthshire, only for Monmouthshire. Well, they don't understand the systems, do they? But that thing about the sexual health thing keeps coming back to me, and thinking we're going to have to do something with child and family around that. Try and understand how that fits in, and whether it's going to be part of what Sarah's going to be talking to them about, to find their ideas about the solutions, because I don't know what the solutions are.
I'm not. No.
No. Sorry, but still on the. Yeah.
I think it's about how to formalise that ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. That's what I was.
Yeah, they're all more interested in their lunch now, aren't they? Yeah.
I think it's about. I mean, I think it's
Yeah, very good.
Thank you very
actually.
much.
I was so glad Luke was here because so much of what they were asking was about the organisation of services, which, yeah,
And education, because
yeah. We should actually have had somebody from education on the panel, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
With hindsight, it would have been helpful.
We had the 3 topics. We couldn't really guess what else would have come up. So.
No, but so much of the mental health stuff is
Well, it
about the
highlights
school
mental
response.
health in schools.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
hopefully it'll help how you need to work with
And how they, yeah.
Yeah, these are young people who are
Yeah.
feeling they didn't care when you were school or when you were us.
And I think part of the issue is that it's not actually mental health they're talking about, it's emotional well-being they're talking about, isn't it? It's not mental health in the pure sense of intervention.
Not mental health in the specialist No,
No.
I mean...
Yeah.
No, it was everybody. No, they said to me, they said, can you just condemn it?
I likewise completely personalised it. I was on
And
the verge
Ian.
of walking,
Yeah.
to be honest.
No, you didn't have to make them too, but...
No, yes.
Passive-aggressively short answer.
And thank you for the coffee, that did keep me going.
It wasn't just too long an answer. You had a video for everything as well.
Well, that was just.
No, I thought I liked that. I thought that was good.
We've got a 3-hour movie next time.